Hi, everyone. I thought we'd check out this trial. Richard Merritt, accused of killing his own mother.
On February 1st of 2019, the defendant, Richard Merritt, brutally and maliciously attacked and murdered the victim, Shirley Merritt. He used a kitchen knife to stab her multiple times in the back and the chest and the throat and the face. And then he picked up a 35-pound dumbbell, which he held above her head and bludgeoned her with. Then he left her body dead and bleeding and crumpled at the bottom of the stairs to her own.
So, right away, we're hearing about overkill. We're hearing about wounds to the face. The weapons involved are weapons found at the scene. So this is not like somebody who went there with an intention to harm her and brought a kit or brought a weapon with them. The overkill suggests something personal.
That you will see is that she was somebody who was always giving of herself. She could have retired years before, but because she loved her job in patients and family services at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, she continued to work there until the day of her death. She was the kind of person that if you were her friend and if it was your birthday, she would have made you one of her famous butt cakes. She loved
Humanizing the victim. This is good.
cooking meals for her family. She loved going to her grandson Jack's games, but it was discovered that he had violated the trust of his mother, of his wife, of his kids, and of many of his clients. Starting sometime in 2014-15, several of his clients started coming out of the woodwork, reporting that he was stealing from them. Cobb County investigated the charges and found that he had, in fact, stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars and defrauded many of his clients. Most of
Gosh, does this sound familiar?
They charged him with a 34-count indictment with several counts of theft by taking, various degrees of forgery and exploitation of elderly victims. Finally, on January 18th of 2019, exactly 2 weeks before the day of the murder, the defendant faced a Superior Court judge in Cobb County and entered a guilty plea to all 34 counts on the Cobb County indictment. The judge sentenced him to 15 years to serve. However, there were some caveats to that. First of all, the defendant had to wear an ankle monitor so that the court system could keep tabs on his whereabouts to prevent him from running. Well, knowing that Shirley was going to likely be too emotional to drive her son to the jail, Jeffcoat suggested that he and Joan drive from Birmingham to Stone Mountain the morning of February 1st, which was the turning date, and that Mike would drive the defendant to the Cobb County Jail, which was about 45 minutes away to an hour away. They were even planning on spending the night because they didn't want Shirley to be alone. On the morning of February 1st, Mike Jeffcoat got what he considered to be a very uncharacteristic text message from Shirley. It said, "Mike, I wish you wouldn't come. Please come another weekend. Things are bad here." Mike was worried, but he knew that Shirley was somebody who was emotional, and he wanted to give Shirley and the defendant their privacy on that day. So he and Joan decided not to drive into Atlanta.
So, of course, I'm wondering whether the victim actually sent that message or if somebody else sent that message in order to prevent these people from coming. Now, if somebody else sent the message, then they would have had to have known that these people planned to be there.
The next time Mike saw her was the next morning when he drove into Atlanta, went into her house, and found her dead at the bottom of the basement stairs. The defendant, in the meantime, never turned himself in to the Cobb County Jail at 5 o'clock, by 5 o'clock on February 1st. And by this time, he was gone, in the wind. The medical examiner found that she had been stabbed 4 times in the back, 1 time in the side. She had been stabbed under the right clavicle in the neck, which severed her jugular and caused her to bleed out. She was stabbed several times in the face, and the force was so strong, ladies and gentlemen, that the blade of that 9-inch knife lodged into the bones in her skull, and the handle broke off. But that wasn't enough, because laying next to her, crime scene investigators found a 35-pound dumbbell with blood and hair on the end. And the medical examiner found that the right side of her head had basically been bludgeoned. It had been bashed in to the point where the basal bones in her skull were shattered. Investigators arrived on the scene, and it was very clear to them that this had not been a case where an intruder came into the house and killed Shirley Merritt. There were no open or broken windows. All the doors were closed. There was no sign of forced entry or any tampering at all. All the furniture was upright. There were valuables that had not been stolen. In fact, Shirley Merritt's purse was still on the scene, and it had blank checks in it. What's more, the 2 weapons that were used weren't something that somebody had brought in. They came from inside the house. The knife with a 9-inch blade was a kitchen knife that came right out of Shirley Merritt's own knife block on her kitchen counter. The dumbbell was in storage, waiting in her basement, and you're going to actually see the mark on the carpet where it had been resting prior to the defendant picking it up and killing.
So that's curious. If the knife was in the block on the kitchen counter, and we're looking at what appears to be a frenzied attack, an overkill. It could have been a heat of the moment type of thing, or a dispute that went this way. One would expect that she would be found in the kitchen, but then there's the dumbbell is in a different location in the basement. She was found in the basement. So now I have all kinds of questions around sort of this sequence, where the attack started and ended. If it all took place in the basement, then the offender would have had to have got the knife and brought it to the basement and then got her to come downstairs. I guess we're gonna see what the evidence says, but this has got me interested.
He went to Nashville, Tennessee, and he started a whole new life. He met people out there. He got a job at a bar. He started online dating, and in fact, met a woman who he started a relationship.
Wonder when he planned his new life. Wonder if he knew that at the time of sentencing, or if it was a matter of fleeing on the day, whether he killed his mother or not. Interesting.
We know where the defendant was almost every minute of February 1st of 2019 because we have something that we don't have in a lot of homicide cases. As I told you, when the judge in Cobb County gave the defendant 2 weeks to turn himself in, he ordered him to wear an ankle monitor. So we're able to put tabs on the defendant's whereabouts almost the entire day until he cut his monitor off. That morning, the defendant woke up at his mother's house on Planters Row. He left the home at 8 a.m. His daughter, who is disabled, had an appointment with a neurologist, and the defendant agreed to go. It was kind of his last goodbye to his daughter, Mia, and he met his then wife, now ex-wife, Janine, there. It was a doctor's appointment in Sandy Springs. He returned to the house on Planters Row at 9:38 that morning. Just 1 minute later, Mike Jeffcoat got, again, what he considered to be a suspicious, uncharacteristic text from Shirley Merritt saying, things are real bad here, don't come. Now, you're going to see the text messages. They are a screenshot. The time on the text message actually says 8:39 a.m., but remember, that was...
What happened in the morning then? Something happened between, if he did this. Something went on between him and his ex-wife. Maybe there was a conversation or an argument. Interesting. The timing is interesting. Why only 1 minute after arriving home that text is sent, whether it was him or his mother, there's a reason why for that timing.
The defendant leaves the residence, according to the ankle monitor records, at 2:30 p.m. because between those times, between 9:38 and 2:30, the defendant was at the house, and sometime during those hours, he killed Shirley Merritt. The defendant leaves the residence at 2:30, and he travels north up to Norcross. He stops at a Kroger just for a couple of minutes, probably to gas up on the way, and he arrives at a QT station in Norcross at 2:52 p.m. Detectives pulled the surveillance camera from that QT station, and you're going to have a chance to watch it during the course of that trial. And you know what's really interesting about that is that the defendant isn't in his own car, which had been left at the scene, and you'll see in photographs. He's driving Shirley Merritt's Lexus. It's kind of a dark gray color, kind of crossover SUV. It will be the second vehicle that you see pull into the QT entryway. You're going to see the defendant get out of the car. He is wearing a green shirt. It has a design on it that says Ecuador. He walks into the service station. He buys a couple of waters, a candy bar.
Just curious whether at this time in the afternoon, so after the homicide, as they allege, if he's wearing the same clothes that he wore in the morning to go to his appointment.
Pays cash, and then he leaves. He then travels west on I-285, and he travels north on I-75. At 4:12, the defendant exits I-75 onto the Cass White Road exit, and at 4:14, the ankle monitor company gets the alert that he has cut off his ankle monitor. At 5 o'clock, the defendant had been ordered to turn himself into the Cobb County Jail, but he never did. He was long gone by then. Well, by this time, Mike Jeffcoat and some other family members had tried to communicate with Shirley. After 5, they got a call from the Cobb County Sheriff's Department learning that the defendant never turned himself in, and realizing that they had not heard from Shirley, they got really concerned. So they started calling 911 here in DeKalb County. Officers, Sergeant John O'Bester and Officer Ashley Nelson from the DeKalb County Police Department went out to Shirley's house, and you know what they found? They didn't find any signs of forced entry. They found that all of the windows were intact. There had been no signs of tampering. The garage door was closed. And let me tell you, they tried to get into that house. They arrived there at 5:39 p.m. and were there for actually a couple of hours. They looked into the windows. They didn't see.
So time of death is going to be really important. I mean, they can't figure it out to the minute. But what we're hearing here is when the accused was home and when he left. Subsequent to his being in the wind, the police arrive at 5 p.m. and find no sign of forced entry or tampering or anything. It's not absolute proof, but it certainly goes against the idea that somebody else maybe broke in and did this to her for some reason. If he wants to allege that something happened after he took off, it's going to be hard to make that argument.
See any kind of signs of a struggle, but what they did see is Shirley Merritt's purse just sitting there, which they found to be very strange. They also saw the defendant's car. It was a black Honda. It was a car that Shirley had bought for him after she posted bond for him, and it was out in the driveway. At this point, everyone was concerned and really worried for Shirley. Mike Jeffcoat made the decision the next morning to wake up early and drive from Birmingham to Georgia. He was able to get a key from the defendant's ex-wife for Shirley's house. He went in, and that's when he saw Shirley laying in the basement. He called 911 on February 2nd at 9:28 a.m., and that's when they arrived and started to investigate.
They will focus you on those few days at the end of January and the beginning of February 2019. Those days in which Mr. Merritt was to turn himself in on a sentence on February 1st. The days of January 30th and January 31st when Mr. Jeffcoat, Shirley Merritt's husband's cousin, was making communications with Mr. Merritt and Mrs. Merritt about the accommodations for them. It will focus you in on those days and not the bigger picture and days leading up to that. They will focus you in on those days and the mistakes of Mr. Merritt, but not what's surrounding it. So let's talk a little bit about the...
Hold on. Are they about to suggest that there's an alternate murderer? The questions that you ask about a scene and a crime include why this particular victim at this particular time, at this particular location, in this particular manner. Because the answers to those questions tell you a lot about motivation, about the possible identity of the person who committed the crime. It sounds like they're going to suggest that maybe somebody else did it who had a beef from before. So why her? Why then? Why not bring a kit? Right? So this is going to be interesting. They're making me question.
We'll hear that Mr. Merritt was an attorney. And during his time as an attorney, he made mistakes that he is not avoiding.
So, mistakes. She has to spin it this way. It's her job. It's a mistake, you did a bad thing one time and you're really embarrassed and so you try to fix it? Sounds like, though, that this was an ongoing mistake repeatedly. Gosh, this sounds familiar, doesn't it? Didn't we just recently have a trial very much like this?
And what the state will try to distract you from is those individuals a part of that case. That case involved a number of families and people who had money taken from them. It involved individuals who were upset, understandably. They were angry.
Is she going to suggest that one of those victims maybe did this? Right? Like, where have we heard this before?
They will then try to narrow your attention on the numbers as they have today. They will present you with times of text messages, times of leaving the house or going to appointments. They will present you with coordinates, location coordinates for where people were, or...
You know what? If the prosecution did not provide a timeline and specifics and locations and coordinates, the defense would be saying they're not providing timelines and locations. They don't know.
You will be presented with no electronic evidence in this case. I expect that you will hear testimony that a number of electronics were collected. Desktops, laptops, cell phones, iPads. There will be no information on any of those tied back to Mr. Merritt in this case. There'll be no...
That could mean there is no evidence of that because it isn't there because he never used those electronics for anything that would get him in trouble, or because like he didn't, and the reason he didn't use the electronics in a manner that would get him in trouble is because he just didn't do anything wrong. It could mean that he just never needed to look anything up or text anybody to make a plan. And the fact is, he's a lawyer. He knows they can get all that stuff. All right, guys, that's it for opening statements. I will try to get to the witnesses later. Thanks for watching.